Dear colleagues, I think we can start. We will talk on the topic implementing the psychological support for children in eastern and southern regions. And we'll have here Sergiy Kvit, who is the Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine, Giovanna Barberis, who is the UNICEF representative in Ukraine, Andriy Meleshevych, President of the National University Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and Vitaly Panov, Director of the Ukrainian Scientific and Methodological Center of Applied Psychology and Social Work. Good morning, dear friends. I have a great pleasure to start our today's press conference as we are talking about a very important project, social and psychological support, first of all, to our children who have suffered in this or that extent from the war. They have moved with their families to other regions of Ukraine. We are talking about 5 regions closest to the war zone, but they also went to other regions. As of November last year, almost 18,000 children went to schools in other regions of Ukraine. They have all continued their studies, but they still need social and psychological rehabilitation. This is a very serious thing, and the project that we are talking about now is of a great significance. Apart from the ministry that I represent, UNICEF and Kyiv-Mohyla Academy and the Kyiv Scientific and Methodological Center of Practical Psychology took part in the project. What have we done in this project? First of all, we taught 400 psychologists at schools. So now we have school psychologists of a absolutely different quality. You have to understand what is happening in the east of Ukraine. 21 schools on the territory which is controlled by the Ukrainian authorities are closed, and 212 schools have to this or that extent suffered damage, and they are still continuing their work. The situation is very complicated. It was the first time that we came across this situation. Since November last year till May this year, 13,000 children got help from professional psychologists. This is very important, and you could monitor the press, and there were publications at first that kids have difficulties with joining new classes and collectives, but then those publications have waned away. And I think this is very important in the context of supporting and helping those people. These are my brief opening remarks. Now I'm pleased to give the floor to our partners from UNICEF.
Mr. Minister, good morning to everybody. I really would like to start by really thanking the Ministry of Education and the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy for the very good collaboration that we are having, particularly on the psychosocial support program to children and families that have been affected by and are affected by the conflict. As the Minister has already mentioned, more than 400 psychologists have been trained with the new skills on how to identify and respond to children's needs, particularly in terms of trauma and distress. These are school psychologists that are providing group sessions for children, allowing them to play and to talk about and spell out, their concerns and their feelings. And they're giving, them space for understanding, better what is happening, what has happened, and how they can react and better improve, on some of their concerns. In 6 months, more than 11,000 children were supported, and more than 1,500 caregivers were also covered. The school psychologists in schools have worked in different regions, the Donetsk, Lugansk, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk. So we are really very satisfied, actually, with the results obtained in such a short, period of time, and a very, very good result has been really the integration of this program, training program, into the Ministry of Education's in-service training program for school psychologists. This is, I think, one of the best results, apart from, of course, alleviating the stress and trauma in children. And again, going back to this, I would like to mention again the impact on children. We were able, together, the Academy, together with the Center for Applied Psychology and Social Work, have conducted extensive pre- and post-assessments of children who received 2 months intervals of psychosocial support. And the findings are very encouraging and very interesting. Of the children interviewed initially, 37.5% of them showed high levels of distress. And after the support, after the intervention, this percentage went down to 11.3%. So there has been a considerable improvement in children's social behavior. Children seem to be more interested in interacting with their peers, and they are less isolated, or they are really trying to socialize with the rest of their peers. So, and the percentage of children expressing active social interaction grew from 72% to 85%. So these are very, very important results. So to witness the fact and to sustain the fact that the program is indeed of relevance, and we are definitely very much interested in continuing this support, this collaboration, and to expand even further the program. So we are really looking forward to continue, this collaboration. There are new partners and new actors that are coming in and providing support in psychosocial, and I think the role of the Ministry of Education and the local authorities, administrations involved in education to maintain coordination and technical relevance and quality will be extremely important. Thank you very much again, and congratulations to all for this excellent results. Thank you.
Я надаю слово Андрію Анатолійовичу Meleshevych, президенту Києво-Могилянської академії.
Дякую, Сергій Мироновичу. Цей рік є
Andriy Meleshevych, the president of the Kyiv-Mohyla University. This is a jubilee year. We've been in existence for 400 years, and this story in the history of the academy is linked closely to the history of Ukraine. We've always been working to improve our state and in favor of Ukraine. What has happened over the last half year? And a lot of changes, political, economic, social, and we tried to understand what we can do in order to alleviate the sufferings of those people who are affected by the situation. We understood that luckily Ukraine for quite some time did not have any combat action and didn't take part in them, and we didn't have experience how to work and how to help people who suffer as a result of military conflict. We understood that there will be some people who would need psychological support, and we launched several projects. First of them is the help to children who were in the war zone or next to it. So this actually was the start of the project, together with our respected partners UNICEF and Ukrainian partners. The project of psychological help to kids who were in the conflict zone and who left the conflict zone to the schools and in other places. You've heard a lot about this project, and I want to share with you some thoughts about the next project that Kyiv-Mohyla Academy is launching. Regrettably, we see the situation. You know, the war conflict is going to end this or that way, and our soldiers will come back from war, and we don't have experience on integration, reintegration of our military into a peaceful environment, and there is a lot of issues that arise. You know that in other countries, the level of divorces is much higher among those who come back from the war zone, and a lot of other problems. So several months ago, the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy decided to create a center for psychological rehabilitation of our military. It will soon start its work. This is another measure to help our society to create peaceful environment. Also, this year we are opening the psychology chair at the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and we begin a baccalaureate program on psychology. This is not going to be a purely theoretical program. As you see, there are several very, very practical projects where our teachers and students will work. My great thanks to all our partners, and especially to UNICEF. Before I give the floor to Sergiy Bogdanov, I'd like to tell about the background of our participants. Andriy Meleshevych is a Kyiv resident, and he has a PhD from an American university where he taught for 14 years. Sergiy Bogdanov has a PhD in Vienna, and he is from Slovyansk. I met him at a railway station in Slovyansk, asked him, what are you doing there? And he said, I was born there. So we have a very solid scientific foundation. Our participants are very serious scientists.
I'd like to thank all the colleagues, and first of all, the school psychologists who were working with children. Mr. Panok will tell more about their work, but this project is unique for me because it was quite timely. We were working when there were military actions going on, and we were providing assistance to children when they needed it badly. That is a project of very successful cooperation between the university and school, and for us it became clear that the system of school psychology is working very well. We were teaching psychologists, we were helping them, but they did a lot of work. And one more thing, that is what Ms. Barberis said, that the project was very efficient, and part of it was scientific research that corresponds to all the standards of scientific research. We were using valid methodologies. We had many children, 3,000 plus children, who we questioned before beginning of the work to understand the impact of our program on the condition of children, and that is the survey that we can trust. I can talk about results, but first I can tell what children are suffering from. They are suffering from traumatic distress, which is different from everyday distress. It is caused by the events which are beyond the normal, the threat of death to yourself or the relatives. Half of children heard explosions, 20% saw how other people were beaten, every 10th person saw the beaten people, and these events cause different reactions, very complicated. These are fear, sorrow, and the child recollects about that all the time. They cannot get rid of these thoughts, and that makes it difficult for a child to go to school to study. The child gets insulated, and that is what Ms. Barberis said. The normal child that sees that children are in the street wants to go and play with them. The children who survived such awful events looks at them and decides to stay home, and with time it becomes a problem. Such reactions are normal initially, the first month, but when they stay for long, that becomes a problem. The objective of our program was how to help such children to recover but it is important without the psychotherapeutical assistance, because psychotherapeutical assistance is expensive, and we could act quickly and we could use the resources of school psychologists, the resources that were in schools, and we succeeded in that. And I would like again to mention the main results of our survey and say that first of all, this is a decrease of the intensity of post-traumatic reactions after just 2 months of the program, and that was as part of the school process. We had the reduction that before the program started, we had 1598 and we got 721. The intensity is much smaller. Number of children who have very strong post-traumatic reactions was also reduced from 37 to 11%. It is important because such recollections which are unpleasant, they are on the way for a child to enjoy life, to be with friends, and in the future could lead to very serious psychic problems. Second thing what we managed to change was hyperactivity of children. We saw that those children who participated in our programs were hyperactive. About 20% of children were had abnormal level of hyperactivity. Boys had more than girls. There were 28% of such boys. And that meant that it is more difficult for such children to study, to establish relations. They probably will be more susceptible for taking different psychosomatic preparations. And in the end, we had just 10% of such children, not 20%. And the third important indicator, it's about social activity, the desire of a child to communicate with others, to look for contacts and friends. We know that such behavior helps to survive through the stress as soon as possible. And this behavior got improved, and number of children who had normal behavior went up from 71% to 85%. So what can we see looking at these results? The system of school psychology is working. We need to teach psychologists not just in the East but all over Ukraine, because the military actions may continue. We will have more IDPs, and the military servicemen will be coming back home, and that also influences the condition of children. The children of the parents who have traumas can also get traumas or be distressed, and we need the comprehensive programs that would help not just to work with psychologists, but with teachers, with parents, so that everyone who participates in the school process gets this assistance. And these 11% who, despite this good work, have not improved, they still have problems, they require specialized assistance, psychotherapeutic, and we believe this should be provided outside of school, and we need to develop the network of such organizations where people can get high quality, free of charge assistance, because this problem may stay for some time. We need to think about that systemically. Thank you. Now I will give the floor to Vitaly Pannok from Ukrainian Scientific and Methodological Center of Applied Psychology and Social Work.
Vitaly Pannok, Director of the Ukrainian Scientific and Methodological Center of Applied Psychology and Social Work, Doctor of Psychology, Professor, the National Academy of Pedagogical Sciences of Ukraine, and we are part of the Pedagogical Academy. However, according to the instructions on psychological service in Ukraine, we are an organization that methodologically manages the activity of in the schools. So we are actually under the guidance and management of Sergiy Kvit, although under Vasil Kremin as well. Okay, I'll step away from the program for a bit, and I'll tell you that our psychological service is not very prominent in mass media, but within 20 years we've done a lot. I'll quote some numbers. As of today, we are working in every type of educational establishments, and we employ psychologists and social pedagogues, and there are 23,240 workers of psychological service in Ukraine. Methodological centers are set up in every district and region of Ukraine. This data does not cover the occupied Crimea and Sevastopol or occupied districts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. We've been in existence for 20 years. We think it is an important lever to reform the education system. It is built according to new methods, organizational and methodological, which allows us to rather urgently respond to the most important social and political events, including those that happen within the system of education. I mean, first of all, the reform that is going on there. Apart from major tasks, the psychological service helps students, parents, or other caretakers. On the 24th of February, when Maidan was still burning, we issued a letter about psychological support because we forecast that there would be victims and people who suffer, and it was about how to help the victims and their relatives, their families. On the 11th of March, we issued another letter that contained this suggestion that special centers for psychological support should be created. Now we are involved in several programs of the Ministry of Education. As far as the program that we are discussing here is concerned, I want to tell you that this program was developed with the use of the most contemporary methodologies of social drafting and management. This is the most modern thing that there is in Europe or in the USA. Besides, we used social methods of psychological support that are being applied in the countries where there are well-developed psychological services. So with the help of UNICEF, the ministry, and the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, we were able to bring new technologies of work into our work. If we talk about the implementation of this project, the general design of the project was like this. Step one was the probing and definition of determining the level of distress among treated. Then there were focus groups with parents of children who were affected. After this, we selected 400 workers of psychological service in 5 regions, mentioned here by the minister, and we conducted training. After the training, the psychologists went back to their schools where they started to work, also at kindergartens and some other out-of-school educational establishments. Those were psychologists not just from our side, but there were all psychologists who work behind the front line. And I'd like to, first of all, make a remark about praise Sergiy Bogdanov, who went there through road checkpoints more than once, and now we may already say about this. They, psychologists, are under our supervision and intervision. After this, there was another research according to the same methodology, and the comparison of the first and second results provides us with grounds to speak about the level of success of the project. This is the novel psychological approach, which is not used even everywhere in Europe. As a result of the work, I first of all, of course, must thank UNICEF in the first turn, who understood our needs. Our ministry, of course, manages us and will manage, but I would like to tell you that apart from that, according to the results of the project, we issued a program of improving skills of practical psychologists that can be used at the institutes of after graduate education. The only thing is you have to find people who will run this project. The conclusions. First, the project should be spread to every region of Ukraine. According to our data, and we collected information last March, it was presented at the board of the ministry. The psychological service of the Ministry of Education of Ukraine provided support to 214,000 people, among whom are internally displaced children and their parents, children of anti-terrorist operation participants, children of those who died on Maidan and in anti-terrorist operation, their families. 747 psychologists from among our psychologists work at military commissariats, so at the moment psychological service is the most powerful and maybe the only state-run psychological service that can realize large-scale social projects. So here the Ministry of Education can be regarded as an organization that can essentially influence the general situation and the problems rehabilitation. So our vision of the future development is as such. Broadening of the program of the training of social psychologists, compulsory training of teachers, because psychologists finds it hard to work without a teacher, then publication of methodological handbooks and advice. Fourth, organizational work with parents through school, through practical psychologists, which is possible, of course, and feasible. In other words, we all have to think how this program develops in the nearest future. And now we mentioned here fighters from the anti-terrorist operation zone who are already coming back. And we started already to look into this problem. And by the way, the ATO fighters are parents and they visit the school as well. And in a village or in a small town, the only psychologist is a school psychologist. Probably we wouldn't like this, but they have to perform functions of area psychologist. And when a person suffers, a psychologist cannot refuse to help them. They have to provide at least first psychological help. So the system of psychology education should get new methodologies. Any questions, dear colleagues?
Any questions? Please introduce yourselves and ask questions. Bogdana Kostyuk. Two questions to you, Mr. Kvit. From the practices of volunteers, from experience of volunteers, I can tell you that very often the girls from psychological departments come to the warriors. Who should they provide psychological assistance to? You know that is it worth using the experience of Israel to introduce at psychological departments of our universities, maybe pedagogical universities, the military psychology, providing assistance to wounded? And the next question to Mr. Meleshevych. There are several programs developed by the Ukrainian groups of volunteers, and these are about providing assistance, psychological assistance to ATO warriors who come back. Will the center of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy be ready to cooperate with such groups? Maybe organize some joint activities. I can tell you briefly, we do use different experience. Besides this program, which is being presented now, we are working also with Israeli specialists, experts, and in Kyiv-Mohyla Academy they had joint trainings. Military psychology is a little bit different. It's psychology of those who participate in military actions, but also the support of those who participated in military actions. This year we license more psychological programs, and we will receive more people for these programs. But there is another problem, as Vitaly Panok mentioned. If the psychologist is not well qualified, well prepared, then they get exhausted very quickly, and all the things related to war, training at the military departments and many things related to war. Our system of education and science reacts to that more and more. The second question was to Mr. Meleshevych. I wanted to add to the first one. Till today we had no such experience. That is where we were lucky, and where we are unlucky is that we received this experience, and the countries who have such experience and who are willing to share with us, we request them to share. And we had very good cooperation with the psychologists from Israel. These are former Ukrainians who went there and received this experience. At some stage, some people came to us from Croatia, because they also had similar problems during their war. And of course, the second question is quite rhetoric. That is a joint common cause. The first question, technical, 400 psychologists. Did they work in all schools where IDPs were? Is that number of psychologists sufficient? And what is important? Money, advice, what's... 400 psychologists. In each school, there are psychologists working. We trained 400. These are not all school psychologists. The idea was that we will train these people and then later they will be training their colleagues. And that's what was happening. I believe 5, 6, many colleagues were receiving some knowledge from them. The project started in July 2014, but the work with children started in November 2014. The project started in November 2014, and the work with children started in January 2015. Now is the time for summer holidays, and they work in summer camps, school camps. They offer different forms of meetings for children, and with the beginning of a new year, this work will continue. I would like to add, every year we are preparing for the Ministry of Science and Education of Ukraine the draft letter on the specific features of the activity of psychological service in the new educational year. We are preparing such letter this year, and we will draw attention of our psychologists to some important problems, and the results of that program will become will be contributed into this letter. Any other questions or clarifications? The clarification from UCMC. The question to Sergiy Bogdanov.
How this realization is shaped, and what is the age of the children who are being helped? Well, this is mostly in group form because we wanted to give as much support to as many children as possible. The program may be used in school or preschool establishments, and we also train psychologists from kindergartens, but of course the program was modified. We took age categories into account, and the younger the kids are, the more play forms you have, but when they become older, then we pay more attention to discussion and to pouring out their feelings. At higher educational establishments, our psychological service is less numerous. They are starting to unfold. They have a lot of financial problems, but in those educational establishments where there is psychological service, it does help both internally displaced students and those who study in those regions. There is such a vision of the problem that children of a older age perceive the situation in a more complicated form, because and you know, it is easier to work with younger children because they can be retuned to something good easier. But is it more difficult with older kids? Well, there are special traits in working with younger and older children. The problem is that you should use adequate methodologies. You cannot, for instance, use the methodology for children of 14 to 17 to children who are 5 or 6, because psychological specifics are absolutely different. So one of the methodological problems that Sergiy mentioned here is working out adequate methodology for children of different age. And of course you have to take into account regional specifics and the specifics of family upbringing. Also want to tell you that we haven't found anything significant statistically between younger children and older children, we have the impression that the help is being accepted in a good way in both categories. And of course, the high level of professionalism is very important, and adhering to the methodology. And we are very much concerned about this at Psychological Service, because every methodology or every method can be discredited with unprofessional, non-professional approach. Unfortunately, we see this quite a lot. Do you have any statistics about how many children who are in the east of Ukraine need this psychological help? Well, our research was just a component of the project, and our first aim was to provide support. So we held research only among those kids with whom we worked. You should not extrapolate this to the entire population of Ukraine. We need to conduct additional research to tell you about the general situation.
Add to what has been said, UNICEF estimates that around 100,000 children are in need of this kind of support. But of course, this is just an estimation, and this is an estimation that was made already a few months ago. We do believe that probably, as the situation is definitely not improving, these are numbers that is a number that you know, is probably higher than what we had estimated some time ago. The situation, of course, is of extreme concern for those children that had fled the conflict, but of course even more of concern the children that are in the areas affected by the conflict. So it's the non-government controlled areas, but it's all, you know, all the areas on both sides along, you know, the contact line.
Thank you. Можливо, у когось ще уточнення, запитання? Якщо ОІСТВ уточнює про роль ЮНІСЕФ.
The role of UNICEF in this program?
Yes, yes.
Is supporting the training, has supported the training of these psychologists, and is supporting, you know, the activities that are being developed and implemented within the school or the education system, but also outside of this education system, because it's not only through the schools, but also through some community centers that we are providing this kind of support. So it is very much the role, I mean, of financial support. The technical support is coming obviously from the academia, and the Ministry of Education is, of course, involved, as is the system within which we are definitely working.
Я хотів би
on behalf of the Academy of Pedagogical Sciences, I'd like to thank UNICEF for their beautiful work, because it was their idea to provide support, and technical support and financial support was given by the UNICEF. I can tell you that my center, for instance, has only 1,000 hryvnia for business trips, and we would not be able to do this without UNICEF. During the project, we had a wonderful opportunity to communicate with international specialists, and we used it to the full. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for this work, which is very important for Ukrainian families and for Ukrainian kids, and we hope that this program will develop further. Thank you.